Caroline Johnson is the co-founder of the Clear Partnership. Caroline is more of an intermediary, takes agencies and clients on a journey, and has been extremely active in this area. Caroline, sitting one from the left there, and has lots of yeah, it probably was obvious.
Could have been you.
We've got Martin Telling over on the far side, who's the CFO of Omnicom Media Group. So we've got two Martins actually, but Martin Telling is representing the financial side of an agency. He's also chairman of the IPA Finance Policy Group, former chartered accountant, and David Hay, who's nearest me, who's the founder and CEO of Brand Finance, started his career as a chartered accountant as well, and has moved into brand as director of brand valuation, so also thinks quite hard about how you measure and value the intangibles and the unmeasurable. I want to start, Caroline, with you, because I want this to be as practical and detailed as possible. And you work with agencies and clients and you sort of broker arrangements between them. What would be a good example of doing it a different way from simply paying people for the time they put in?
I think the illustration I would always use is where agencies are putting their focus. Your business model, which is a legacy business model, actually has a profound effect on not just the value you're able to deliver for your clients, but also, really importantly, your behaviours, your motivation, your culture, and also how you focus and drive your talent. And the analogy I always use, which I actually got from working with one of the advertisers, in terms of how they visualized what it feels like trying to navigate through agency services. And the visual that they created was of a traditional hardware store. And actually, when you work with agencies, the client is encouraged to walk up and down the aisles of this hardware store, where they are exposed to every nut, every screw, every different type of paint, every different piece of wood, every bracket, numerous widgets and services and individual items that are all individually priced. And it is the client's responsibility not only to check whether all of those widgets and different items are required to build that shelf, but also has created procurement, because if you are selling your services and engaging with your clients at that level, then it's ever so easy for procurement, who are used to buying paper clips, to also be able to drive the price down for every single screw and bracket. And then as you take that client through, often showing them the timber yard at the back, you suddenly come across this really cool architectural practice where the talent sits, and where the talent that can actually have a profound effect on clients' brands and their business challenges and business value is working. And when we actually go in and do the audit and actually look at that agency, what you find is that cool architectural practice that is sitting in the backyard isn't properly monetized. It gives most of its value, which is real value, away for free or in pitching. And the whole behaviors and motivations of that agency, with some really great talent, is about keeping the hardware store alive. And what we do with agencies and with their clients, because it has to be done in collaboration, is swap those around. Make the hardware store, which is the input, the means to an end, less visible, and actually bring the clients in partnership with flexible payment models and commercial models right into the heart of that architectural practice, and make sure they are bringing their business challenges and business ambition right full and centre.
You brilliantly restated the problem. I mean, the most brilliant restatement of the problem that we've had. But I just want to get at an example a good practice that brings that architectural practice to front of house?
We feel the most profound shift and change is when agencies are able to actually invest their money in their clients' business challenges and creating incremental business value. And that means not only do the heads of agencies need to change in the way they think of managing more of a portfolio of different remuneration models, but also allow the agencies to invest, which means taking the focus off some short-term gain and thinking into longer-term investment. And the problem you've got is agencies are working with such marginal margins that actually it's very difficult for them to take revenue off the table now and put some skin in the game for later. However, the agencies that have been able to make that change and utilize different budgets like CapEx and not just OpEx have found not only a profound difference in how they partner with their clients and drive business value, but also in how they get remunerated and rewarded as well.
So it is happening to some extent.
It's absolutely happening.
Martin Riley, you gave another very eloquent restatement of the problem, a very visionary kind of description of how it would be nice to get out of it. What do you do at Pernod Ricard to remunerate your agencies? I'm sure there'll be a variety, but give us an example of something that isn't, we'll pay you X amount per hour.
Well, there is a variety, and it depends on the scale of the brand, and it depends on whether it's a local or global remit. But I think we're moving much more to the sense of output. I mean, in terms of what it is, we really don't like this time-based, effectively paying for inefficiency, potential inefficiency within an agency. And we want to be very specific about what we're looking for. We're also experimenting with different ways of remuneration, and I mentioned about the importance of individuals, and we are prepared to talk to agencies about certain individuals and what we are prepared to pay for those individuals. Often they're quite expensive, and often they may be working with a range of different agencies. So we're trying to get away from the traditional model that we have been working.
What proportion of your budget? Because you gave some WFA graphs of the proportion of contracts or spending that's time-based and commission-based, and what proportion of your budget would be time-based? You'd probably be over half, I would guess.
Yes, it would be 3/4, I would think, still.
So it's kind of icing rather than cake that is.
It's experimental, I think. Yeah. And also this idea Caroline just mentioned about having some skin in the game, and as we take innovation as a key part of our business model for the future, innovation will take a much bigger role. How can agencies work on that innovation principle? Because we will be experimenting on things that may not have a future, and you know, the rule of thumb 1 in 10, etc. But we are encouraging all our teams to really focus on this. Now, can agencies come along with us on that? Could there be a model where they get some of the reward performance if the innovation is successful? That's something we're actively looking at. We haven't set it up yet, but it's something I'd be very keen to do.
And what will be the longest? I mean, you know, my builder is doing some work for us. It's quite traditional. You hold a little bit back and you pay it after about a year, just so that the things that go wrong, the builder doesn't just abscond and you have to face the cost of them. So 5% is a kind of often a bit of a construction fee that might be held back. And a year is the sort of traditional time that you might get him back in, talk about the snags and pay the rest of the money over. What's the longest that you think there's any incentive structure in an output or outcome-based performance that you'd use? Do you ever go back after a year and say, we've assessed this a year later, 2 years later, 3 years later?
Well, we're evolving the review process, which we have a two-way review process with the major agencies. But given that also it depends on the nature of your brand. I mean, one of the things we realize about our brands is they are very, very long-term.
They're slow,
They're very slow. So the metrics that we put in place, even after 1 year, if you're measuring brand equity, isn't maybe going to shift that much. So we haven't actually necessarily got something that you come back up 12.
Which gets us to some of the difficulties. Martin Telling, be interested on the agency perspective on what we've just heard about this. How responsive are the agencies? How imaginative?
Unlike the other Martin, we like time-based models. We're a people-based business. 50% of our cost is people-based. We feel very safe. We feel very comfortable with time-based models. We compare ourselves to other industries like lawyers, like accountants, consultants. They charge themselves based on time. I guess we've been on a journey listening to Ian at my finance policy group. We've all been a little bit cynical about what the P stood for and pissing money away. If only we'd thought of that one at the early stages. That was a good one. But I think the more we listen to clients, and that's what Ian's done, brought in clients, the more we realise that the time-based model is a broken model for our industry. It's a very competitive industry. There'll always be someone out there willing to do it cheaper. So how do we ensure that the best agencies get the best rewards? And I think that's why we need a new measurement system. So I think we have to listen to our clients. I'm a media agency, so I sort of traditionally have what Ian describes as the original performance-based model of commission, about 50% of my revenues. The majority is time-based, but we still have about 10 to 12% of our revenues are performance-based. That means at least half of our profits are performance-based, so we're getting there. But the measures we're using aren't the right ones, I think, not the ones that
Are the right ones, aren't the right
right.
ones.
I think, traditionally, we're in a media agency, it's can you buy this campaign cheaper than you bought it last year? And we've been doing that for about 12 years. Now it's as cheap as it can possibly get. How can it work more effectively, like Peter was talking about just now?
Mm. I mean, is there a sort of an increased risk for the existence of the company as soon as you move away? I mean, because the nice thing about the hourly-based rates is you know your costs are covered. Obviously, you have to lose people from time to time if there isn't enough business or take people on. But I mean, if you're not being paid, there's no guarantee that your costs are covered. And if there aren't huge assets in the business and huge reserves, then you just...
And I think that still we need to understand what we're trying to achieve today, and it's not going to be a radical change in that model. We talk about the Coca-Cola model of 70-20-10. Caroline uses that as part of her model. There's going to be aspects of our business that need to be on time-based, which is why myself and Janet, we've got Lab 1, talking about how can we have a better time-based model. How can it be clearer to what the outputs are, whenever a pitch is done and it's costed out and each agency comes out with its fee. Has that been based on any kind of science, or is that really sort of finger in the air stuff? So we need to be more scientific with the input type model, but still I think using the 70-20-10, I think we can afford to adventure more, explore more, be more long term. Most of our relationships with our clients, certainly with my agency, are long term, but the remuneration is short term. We've just been shown that there's a the fit isn't really there in terms of relationship and remuneration structure.
Which brings us to David Haig. I just wonder if you would comment on the measurement side of this, David, and the problems of going longer term and measuring value, because that's what you essentially do, the interbrand intangible valuations, brand valuations.
Well, we tend to do brand finance valuations, actually, rather than interbrand valuations. What I was thinking about was that I've actually been involved with the debate about remuneration for quite a long time. Back in 1989, when I left WCRS, one of the first things I did when I left was to write a report for Janet Hull on remuneration in agencies, which we titled Rewarding the Advertising Profession. And we made a direct comparison between lawyers, accountants, and the advertising profession, because in those days, you did actually gather information about what individuals were paid. And that showed quite clearly that advertising people across the board were paid substantially less as individuals than their equivalents in the other professions. And we used Hay research data to demonstrate that. And I remember actually it was quite amusing because the only coverage that we got in things like The Sun was ad agency guys crying about the fact they can't afford their Ferraris. And I was interviewed by Fiona Bruce, who was basically taking the piss, saying, you think ad agency guys don't get paid enough. But all the data demonstrated that that was absolutely the case. And the reason is that the other professions are very efficient at organising themselves in such a way that they charge premium prices for their top people. They do it consistently, and they organise themselves well. Now, I mean, if you looked at a model to compare the ad industry with, you couldn't get a better one than management consultancy, the big four, or the big lawyers. I mean, habitually, they are charging £10,000 to £20,000 a day for their top people. They earn millions. I think yesterday Linklaters announced they made £553 million profit. So if that doesn't demonstrate there's an argument for time-based fees, I don't know what does. And the interesting thing about that study that we did 25 years ago was that one of the things we did, apart from looking at what agency people got paid themselves, we looked at the basis of remuneration. Now, this is 25 years ago. Back then, the biggest source of remuneration was still a full fee. It was 15%. And another large chunk was not full fee, but based on fee. And I was interested to see that stat up there on the wall. I've forgotten what the exact number, but either fixed fees or time-based fees, which are pretty much the same thing. A fixed fee is really just an expression of a time-based fee set in time. It represented, what was it, 60, 70% of the total. So in 25 years, it's gone from time-based fees being almost non-existent to now being 70%. And I think that's an inevitability. And really, I think the industry should embrace the way that the big professional firms run themselves and go for much higher rates. You are never going to win the argument with capricious clients that they should pay you on the long run. However well we might measure what it is, that measurement is for the benefit of the investors and the management. They are not, in my opinion, really going to dig their hands in their pocket and say, if I double the value of the brand, I'll give you a big chunk of it. It's just not going to happen. Whereas if you adopt the approach of McKinsey, PwC and co, and just charge super high prices, then that is the way to get what you want.
But wait.
But it's a market, and if you're not good enough, you won't
so
get
you
it.
go out there and you charge that, and they'll say, well, these other guys will do it for less.
Fine, then go to the other guys.
Then they go to the other guys.
Fine.
And that's, I mean, there is a supply and demand effect, isn't there, that drives the price of the
We live in a market economy.
price of the
you
labour.
can't whinge about the fact that your services aren't paid properly. Make them better.
Well, making them better is different from simply saying we're now going to charge 40% more than we did last time we pitched. I mean, maybe...
Well, how do lawyers do it? They do it by being better. And if people didn't want to pay the amount that Clifford Chance or whoever charged, they wouldn't. They'd go around the
But
corner
let me
to
be
another
clear, though,
lawyer.
that the best advertisers will charge more per hour than the mediocre ones, right?
They should be
Presumably.
more aggressive when they're good. They should clearly you should demonstrate the value of what you're creating. Use people like me or Peter to demonstrate it. But the expression of the way you get paid is the amount you screw out on a daily rate for what you are doing now, albeit by saying, I will create that value for you. It just doesn't make sense to think you're going to get someone sensible in a finance department paying you on long-term brand or share value creation.
Martin Riley, just a quick comment and then I'll take a question or two.
I think there's some interesting elements there, because I think it goes back to the point I was making about individuals. If you identify individuals within agencies who you think can really add a lot of value to your business, then I think you're prepared to pay for them. We're actually doing something similar right now because we've recognized, because of continuity, because of the kind of level of impact that certain individuals can have, we want those individuals on the business. And so the negotiation is how much are we prepared to pay? And I think it's going away from the fact you're buying into a huge structured organization, and to say within that organization there are 2 or 3 people that will make the difference. How much is it going to cost for us to pay for that?
I mean, everybody has their market price and their market value, don't they? And there's going to be a correlation. I'll take some questions from the floor, but I'll just get Caroline to comment on what David was saying.
Yes, I think there is definitely an alternative picture to that, because we've been working with agencies and advertisers for almost 4 years now. And I can honestly say to all of you, there are advertisers today, now, at this moment, that are paying their agencies based on performance and business value, and they're not having to wait many years. That is actually in the marketplace, and it is happening. So whilst I think we all agree you need to have a blend of different payment models, and the time-based model needs to be continually optimized, and of course you should get as well paid as you can for your talent. But there are alternative models that are genuinely working today with advertisers and agencies that are providing both with much more business value. And the point I would stress when you're looking at the arguments across the board is that when you change your business model or go to flexible payment models as an agency, it dramatically changes your behavior and your ability to drive business value when you are unencumbered by selling time and utilizing hours is completely different. What you offer and what you can create is transformational when you are unshackled from being from charging hours. And that for me is a much bigger opportunity, because we're here today to talk about performance and how you drive business value.
It's also great because you don't have to keep all those pesky time sheets.
Yeah.
Right, how many of you here, okay, this is just for the agency people, okay? Agency people. How many of you here think that you could raise your prices without a significant detriment to the business? In other words, you could basically take the David Hague manifesto and say, we're simply undercharging for our services, and the problem is we should just put our prices up. How many of you believe that applies to your business? How many of you don't believe that applies to your business? Yes, so the question is, how many of you believe... I think probably people think they'd like to raise the prices. No, I know you'd like to raise your prices. We'd all like to do that. I'm asking you whether you can, whether you think you could raise your prices. Could you raise your prices without a significant detriment to the business? Probably the reason most of you don't raise your prices is because you think you wouldn't get the business if you charge too much. So I'm just asking how many of you think you can? Right, okay, so you've been... Right. Right. So short of a cartel in which you all got together and said, none of us are going to work for anyone without, we're going to have a union of advertisers who are going, which would allow you to put your prices up. But that might be the problem. But it doesn't seem like many of you really believe you could just jack the prices up.
Sorry,
Go on,
I do as an agency person, but we need more measurement, we need more
evidence
something
to
go alongside the outputs and the outcomes and demonstrate it, whether that's the econometric modelling. I feel slightly guilty to set David up for a sort of very eloquent but controversial statement about time-based is perfect, and I've been in that camp for the last 10 years. But I think everyone that put their hand up there that says they can't put prices up also knows that we can't stick to where we are now. And I think you have to differentiate some of the services we're offering. This is where Caroline has very eloquently put in the 70-20-10. If you're buying a painter, then if that person's going to decorate your room, sure, pay £200 an hour, and if someone will do it for £150, get them. But if you're paying for something to hang on your wall, how long did that take to paint? And that's where creativity comes into it. And we've got to be able to demonstrate that creativity can't be paid for on hours. Right.
Can't be paid for on hours.
Well, it is. That's the problem.
Yeah.
People are saying, well, that took 10 hours to develop that ad, but we just saw that 2 ads can lead to totally different outcomes.
Yeah. David?
Well, obviously I disagree with that. It's patently wrong, in my opinion. I mean, first of all, you have to do measurement to demonstrate what you are doing is effective. It's quite clear. I mean, it's what I do for a living. Clients want to know whether their advertising is effective, whether their brands are growing, whether their share price is going up. They should and will do all of that. That is background mood music for the agencies who are going in and demonstrating why they are worth paying the money for.
So
but in my opinion,
yourself.
The business model that works most efficiently for professional services, which this is a time-based model. If you go to the law firms, you walk in through the door, there's none of this stuff about let's unshackle ourselves from the obligation of doing timesheets. The second they walk in the door, every 6 minutes is measured. And, I forgot, all those jokes about when they get to heaven, they've done more than their life,
Yeah.
And people bill 3,000 hours, and they will vie with each other for billing more and more hours. Now, it creates horrible pressures of its own, but as a business model, it's a very efficient business model. Most agencies I've ever seen are hopelessly inefficient. You may not be able to charge more, but you can certainly run yourself better and not work on clients that take the piss and expect you to work for nothing.
Right. We'll take a couple of points from the floor. Yes, sir. Do tell us who you are. It should work. The roving mics, are they on?
Hello, Jeremy Kaplan from Appraise. I spent most of my life on the client side, proving the effectiveness of what I do, including at the IPA, where we won the Grand Prix for proving the effectiveness of what we do, using Lesbianet and Peter Field and things. There is a fundamental irony here. Premium product, premium price. I actually agree with David to an extent. Whatever you do, whether you sell it or you sell yourself, if you cannot demonstrate it has more value than what somebody else does, you're not going to be able to demand a higher inelastic price for it. That's a fundamental point. So it does come back to proof of delivery. That's a fundamental point number one. And I say that having actually resigned one of the highest spenders in the world because they would not pay us enough, and a year and a half later, they have come back and they are now going to pay us the right price. So that's point number one. Point number two, it is a relationship. And let's be absolutely clear, not all clients, we've got a spectrum, not all clients want to only buy the ultimate creativity. A lot of them do bread and butter day-to-day work. Not everything is going to transform their brand overnight, and therefore they need horses for courses. But the one thing you can be absolutely sure is it is possible to measure in 6 months or less whether you have a client who is willing to tango. And people are trying to generalize and say that there is one rule that fits all. There isn't. The client is just as critical. And if the client is willing to be evaluated, and Martin said, we do a two-way evaluation, the critical question is, what do they hear, what do they listen to, and what do they do about it, and do they factor that into how they reward their agency?
Right, thank you. And, but I think a key thing is that you can use, everybody's agreeing with measurement, but whether you actually tie the payment to the measurement, or whether you say, here's some measurement to show we're really good, and our hourly rates are thus going to be very high. You can separate measurement as a kind of payment metric as opposed to a kind of rate metric. The gentleman there with the beard, and that's it, yeah.
Hi, Dan Shute. I run an agency called Creature of London, which is, I hope, one of the sort of entrepreneurial agencies that we're talking about. 2 years ago, there were 6 of us. 6 months ago, 18. We're now 35. And we work with lots of our clients in different ways. We have time-based models, we have reward-based models, we have risk-based models. But the fact is, without time-based remuneration, we wouldn't exist. You know, investment's great, and we would love to be able to invest in our clients, but that requires either hefty business capital to the point where you can spare some of it, or at startup phase, it requires kind of massive personal wealth. And I think what scares me when we all just start kicking time-based remuneration, as opposed to looking to optimize it, is that it shallows the group of people that can get into this kind of thing. And I think, you know, you look at tech startups that are all VC funded and incredibly short-term based in terms of how they're rewarded. That's not a world that we want to get into. So I think the key thing for me is this is absolutely all about finding efficiency and finding better ways of paying us, but it is also about ensuring that we are paid, and not just fairly, but quickly, because if we're not, then suddenly there's a whole group of people that just won't be able to be in this room.
But no one would be saying have no time-based payment, I don't think. I mean, it's a matter of what sort of scale. Thank you. Does someone else want to make a comment? We've got a gentleman here. We'll take these two here, and then I'll get a last word from the panel, and then coffee. We really are sort of running half an hour late.
Hi, Mike Moran. I now work at Havas Media, but I was for many years a client, and when I was CMO at Toyota, this is mainly directed at Martin, and chairman of the ISBAR exec committee, I probably made the biggest decision of my life that I regret, which was to agree with ISBAR that we should create the COMPAG, the Communications Purchasing Action Group, because I think fundamentally what's broken about the model now can largely be laid at the feet of procurement. Quite genuinely, I mean that. I've been a client, I've been a media owner, I now work in a media agency. I was very heartened by what you said, Martin, that you don't allow procurement into marketing procurement, if I can call it that, without using procurement. I used to do the same thing, and what I witness now at every pitch is that all of the opportunities for better engagement and relationships and different models generally are eradicated by the pitch process, so that when you come out of that process, the winning agency has been stripped down to, cost plus whatever, and locked into a box in terms of the model within which they can operate, the way in which they're able to charge. And all of the innovation and the creativity that you talked about as a possibility has already been precluded, because the conversation is not about the things it should be about. And I think that's the issue that we face today.
Can you just pass the microphone to the gentleman behind you? I know I had a comment.
Hi, it's James Denton Clark from Karmarama. I'm just sort of listening to it and I'm thinking, I don't really understand why we should expect clients to pay us differently to the way we pay ourselves. I mean, the contracts we have with our people is based on time. So, and you know, when you read about how people like Gap and people in the States are doing results-only work environments where they're paying people on results, perhaps we should look to ourselves before we look to how clients pay us and how we remunerate ourselves, and then pass that through in a sort of more progressive sort of work environment.
Mm. You would be in favour of that, or you're
well, I'd be in favour of
against?
experimenting with it. And
Yeah,
to
I mean, the
that's
staff
really
may say,
disaster.
look, actually, I come in each day and I need to be paid for the hours I do.
I'd
suppose
be
they might-
interested to see what happens at Gap when they did it. You know, and that gets rid of the whole thing about sort of the hours that you work and flexi hours, and you know, you just get paid purely on the results.
Yeah, okay, we'll take a last comment, the gentleman in the blue shirt, and then actually this afternoon, but the next panel, I'm going to favour women, actually. We've had a lot more men speaking, but yeah.
Thank you. Paul Phillips from AAR, we're an intermediary. One of the pieces of advice that we counsel clients and agencies on is less focused on the methodology of remuneration and more on profit. So we say to clients, you want your agencies to be making a profit, because if they don't make a profit, you will ultimately suffer in the quality of the people that work on your business, the turnaround of that stuff on your business. So I think what should be included in this discussion is an element of profit, because that ultimately is what all these different models are heading towards. So whether or not it's a different remuneration model for different clients, or the same time-based approach or performance-based approach, if agencies and clients focused a little more on the profitability of agencies, then that might help get through some of the detail of the conversation we've been having.
Look, I think we really do need to stop for coffee. Panel, is there anybody who is burning to say something as a result of what they've heard? If you're... Go on then, Martin.
I have to take objection to the comment that all the problems and all the woes of this world lie for the procurement. You know, it's a two-way street. It takes two to tango, and certainly, you know, sort of Ian brought together clients and agency side of the ISBA meeting we had recently. I know that you know, most of the procurement people that work within our field are looking for us to provide evidence to spend more, because, you know, going back to Ian's original comments, advertising drives profits. I don't think that lawyers and accountants drive profits in the way that advertisers do. There's another area where we're different. So I think we should be looking to work with them to find another currency that goes to their finance director. Maybe that's a bad cop, the finance director within the advertiser that is obviously looking at a discretionary spend on his P&L, and understandably, if I was in his shoes, looking at how I could minimize it. But giving him reasons why he has to spend more on advertising. And then to the point the gentleman made there about, you know, why not get paid the way we pay our people? Well, you know, there are a queue of people at my door at sort of this time of year asking what sort of bonuses they get for the performance they deliver within the agency, and they have KPIs, they have performance appraisals, and you reward them accordingly. I don't see any difference between the way we treat our people with the way in which we'd expect our clients to pay us.
I just want to raise the issue. You might be, by focusing on the procurement people, and I have no idea. I do know some procurement people, and I mean, by and large, they're not as dim as to not realise that there is value which you're trying to obtain for the company, as well as screwing the costs down. It might be that the procurement people are merely the sort of messenger that is telling you supply in the industry is quite great. That means it's a buyer's market and prices tend to be quite low, and that they're not going to pay you a lot more than they need pay for other people. And so it could be that the procurement people just don't understand how good you are, but it could be different. It could be that the procurement people do understand how good you are, but they also know how many good people there are and just how much capacity there is relative to the demand for those services. And if there is a lot of people, you know, wanting to do something because it's a beautiful industry to be in, then the price is not going to be that high. The average wage, I chaired an event on why the salary of dancers in London is so low. The average wage for a professional dancer at that time was £14,000 a year. And it was exactly the same conversation. It's like, why are we paid so little? And the answer is, because there are a lot of people who want to be dancers, and they're quite good. I mean, they're all quite good. And so no one needs to pay them more, because there's another one, if this one wants to be paid more, then you get another one who is paid less. And that is part of what, you know, does drive the dynamics. Go on, David.
Could I just say one very practical point, I think, about the whole procurement issue and payment by results is, clearly if you measure and you show there are results, if you're going to be remunerated on it, other than in a fairly condescending, well, we'll give you that kind of a way, it has to be written into a contract. So you would then be dealing with procurement people to write into a contract measures of performance that would stretch years into the future. Can you imagine how difficult that would be? Either getting the procurement guys to agree to it or getting the finance people to stick to it. And there are so many variables, it's just very impractical. So in the end, it's always just a kind of tip on top. The main thing is the relationship.
Yeah, I think that's well put. And however you structure it, I think one's getting the impression there's going to be a huge chunk of time-based remuneration. Look, okay, let's thank our panel.